Hi, my name is Karen Clark, and I'm an area coordinator with Residence Life. I frequently serve as a Student Conduct Board Advisor. Being a Student Conduct Board Advisor can be challenging, but it can also be an extremely rewarding experience. If you're new to advising, you may be wondering where to begin or what exactly you should be doing. In this video, I'll give you some tips as well as explain to you the role of being an advisor so that both you and the student can have a positive experience. Once you have agreed to be a Conduct Board Advisor, you will be contacted directly by the student. At this point, you should be looking to set up an individual meeting where you can discuss the situation. At this first meeting, I find it extremely important to explain to the student your role as their advisor. It's important that they know that you're an advocate, that you're there to make sure they understand the process and that they feel prepared. I also like to let the student know that I'm not there to provide legal counsel and that my goal is not necessarily to make sure that they're not held responsible for the situation. Oftentimes, you will know very little, if anything, about the incident and the situation that's brought the student before the board. It's very important that you give them an opportunity to explain and that they know you're a safe person to talk to, that you listen with understanding and without judgment. It's okay to ask them questions, and you want to make sure that you have a full, complete understanding both of their behavior and the background information that led them to make the choices they did. Once you feel as though you have a complete understanding of all things related to the situation, then it's time to move on. You want to ask the student how they would like to address this with the board. Typically, students want to either A, accept responsibility for what happened and ask the board for leniency, or explain to the board why they're not responsible for the incident. If the student has decided that they would like to take responsibility for what happened, you may want to discuss with them their past conduct history. Although the board cannot ask them any questions about their previous history, if they are taking responsibility, the board will likely find out about any previous incidents when they move on to the sanctioning point of the deliberation. Oftentimes, students would rather discuss openly with the board what's happened in the past, rather than have the board find out what's gone on once they've left the room. But again, this is totally up to the student. Once we've discussed everything, then it's time to begin to prepare the statements for the board. Oftentimes, students like to prepare two separate statements. An opening statement, where they introduce themselves, describe the incident, and explain any background information that led them to these behaviors. Then they like to have a closing statement, where they will often recap what they've talked about earlier, as well as describe any plans to improve their behavior in the future. I will offer to my students to read their statements and make suggestions. I ask that students email me copies of their statements as soon as they're done, at least several days before the board hearing. Depending on the situation and the student, you may also need to discuss witnesses and statements of support. Statements of support can come from faculty, staff, other members of the community, or people that the student may know from home. If the student would like to bring these statements, it is important that they are mailed directly to the Assistant Dean of Students for Student Conduct and Community Standards. For witnesses, it's important that the student knows that not only will they be able to ask questions of the witness, but the board will as well. It's appropriate for the student to bring in character witnesses as well as witnesses to the actual incident. However, you should caution your student against bringing in too many witnesses or those that will be providing redundant information. At the close of our meeting, I will review with the student the board procedures, as well as remind them of appropriate dress and when and where we'll be meeting for the board hearing. We will then schedule our next meeting. For some students, meeting a few minutes before the conduct board is sufficient, but for others, they would like to meet again about a day or two before the hearing. Again, I leave this up to the student. The day of the board hearing, I will typically meet with the student in the college union about 30 minutes prior to the hearing. I make sure that the student is dressed appropriately, feels prepared, and is ready to go. And I remind them that although I can't say anything during the hearing itself, I am there to support them, and if at any time they need a break to confer with me in the hallway or to collect themselves if they're getting emotional or upset, I let them know that that's what I'm there for. At the close of the information gathering section of the Student Conduct Board, I will then go with the student out into the college union to await the decision of the board. This can be one of the more challenging aspects of advising, but try your best to make sure that the student stays calm and positive. Once the board has made their decision as to the responsibility of the student and, if necessary, any sanctions, return with the student to the room and listen to the results. Once the results are given, I make sure that the student is handling the information appropriately and that they are in a safe place. I then encourage the student to take some time to themselves that evening, get a good night's sleep, have some responsible fun with friends, and contact me the next day about an appeal if they're interested.